Remember when Goodfellas made you feel like you were inside the mob? Ray Liotta's laugh cutting through tension like a knife. Joe Pesci asking if he's funny. Robert De Niro going cold in a single glance. That Copacabana walk that never cuts. The dinner at Tommy's mom's house. The paranoia. The betrayal. The speed of it all. This wasn't just another gangster movie. This was the gangster movie that changed everything. Fast, violent, darkly funny, and somehow more real than real life. But here's the thing. The studio thought they had a disaster. Test audiences walked out in droves. The lead actor, nobody wanted. The most iconic scene was never in the script. And the real Henry Hill, he destroyed his own witness protection because he couldn't stop bragging about the movie. Today, we're counting down 20 weird facts you never knew about Goodfellas. Stick around for number 1. The real Henry Hill got paid nearly $500,000, then blew his cover and lost everything. If you're new here, this is where we dig into the stories behind the movies you love, the ones the studios don't put on the poster. If you're into behind-the-scenes chaos, happy accidents, and Hollywood weirdness, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It helps more than you think. Number 20. When Tommy, Henry, and Jimmy stop at Tommy's mother's house in the middle of the night looking for a shovel, you're watching one of the most beloved scenes in the entire film. The woman who insists on feeding them at 2 in the morning? That's Catherine Scorsese, Martin Scorsese's actual mother. And here's where it gets interesting. Almost every word she speaks is completely improvised. Scorsese gave her one simple direction. Welcome your son home. You haven't seen him in a while. That's it. The only scripted line in the entire scene was her asking about the painting on the wall. And that painting itself? Also real. It was created by Nicholas Pileggi's mother, Susie, based on a National Geographic photograph of a bearded man with dogs. But here's the twist that makes the scene even darker. Catherine Scorsese had no idea there was a dead body in the trunk outside. She played the scene genuinely believing her son and his friends just stopped by for a late-night visit. The warmth she brings to the screen is completely authentic. Warner Brothers initially wanted the scene cut completely, arguing it killed the film's pacing. Test audiences disagreed. Years later, David Chase cited this exact scene as a direct influence on The Sopranos. Every time you rewatch it now, you're watching a real mother feeding real killers, unaware of what's parked 20 feet away. Number 19. Goodfellas was the first Martin Scorsese film that Warner Brothers required to be test screened. Scorsese had never faced this kind of studio mandate before. The results were catastrophic. At the first California screening, 40 people walked out in the first 10 minutes. At the Orange County screening, approximately 70 people got up and left. One audience member's comment card contained exactly 2 words: a profanity followed by "you." Producer Barbara DeFina later recalled the experience with visible tension. The previews were scary. By the time Spider gets killed, the audience would get angry. Warner Brothers chairman Bob Daly admitted publicly that the entire team felt depressed after those screenings, though he maintained they all knew it was still a good movie. Based on those disastrous test results, Warner Brothers made a drastic decision. They slashed the planned opening from approximately 2,000 theaters down to just 1,070. Nicholas Pileggi noted bitterly that this meant relegating the film to smaller, less desirable venues. The studio genuinely believed they had a commercial bomb on their hands. Here's the beautiful irony. Despite being dumped into half the planned theaters, Goodfellas still opened at number 1 at the box office, pulling in $6.4 million from its reduced theater count. It held remarkably well, dropping only 8% in its second week. Every rewatch, you're watching a film the executives wanted to hide. Number 18. Before Goodfellas could even worry about test audiences, it had to survive the MPAA. The Motion Picture Association of America initially slapped the film with an X rating, the same classification reserved for pornography and extreme content. The primary problem? Violence, specifically the execution of Tommy DeVito. Martin Scorsese had to remove exactly 10 frames of blood from that sequence to secure the R rating the studio needed for wide release. 10 frames. That's less than half a second of footage, but those frames made all the difference to the MPAA's rating board. The Billy Bats murder scene went through similar cuts. The original version showed 7 full on-screen stab wounds as Tommy and Jimmy brutally killed him in the bar. Scorsese had to reduce that to 3 visible stabs, with sound effects covering the rest of the violence. Warner Brothers pushed even harder on another scene. They wanted the spider death completely removed from the film. Their argument was simple. It made Tommy too unlikable, too irredeemable. Scorsese fought back, insisting the scene was essential to Tommy's character arc and, more importantly, to Henry's dawning realization of the horror he's swimming in. Scorsese won that fight, but he had to compromise everywhere else. Every rewatch, those murders hit harder when you know they were already the sanitized version. The film was more brutal before anyone saw it, and one actor didn't need any special effects to end up bleeding. Number 17. Michael Imperioli was 23 years old when he landed his first major film role as Spider, the young kid who makes the fatal mistake of talking back to Tommy DeVito. During the scene where Spider gets shot and killed, Imperioli was holding what he assumed was a breakaway prop glass, the kind designed to shatter safely. It wasn't. Someone handed him a real glass. When Joe Pesci's character shoots him and Imperioli falls backward as directed, the glass shattered on impact, slicing 2 of his fingers badly enough to require immediate medical attention. Here's where the story gets genuinely surreal. Imperioli was rushed to a Queens emergency room still wearing the full Spider costume, which included explosive squibs and prosthetic bullet holes across his chest. Picture the scene from the ER staff's perspective. A young man covered in what looked like gunshot wounds stumbles through the door, bleeding from his hands. Imperioli recalled the moment years later in an interview with CNN. 3 bullet holes in my chest and it's Queens, New York. They think I'm about to die. The scene stayed in the film exactly as shot. Scorsese got the authentic reaction he wanted. Imperioli got stitches and a story he'd tell for decades. Every time you watch Spider hit the ground now, you're seeing real blood mixing with the fake, a 23-year-old actor genuinely hurt because someone grabbed the wrong prop. The film's commitment to authenticity went deeper than anyone realized. Number 16. The script for Goodfellas began with a phone call nobody expected. Martin Scorsese cold-called Nicholas Pileggi after reading The Galley Proofs of Wise Guy, Pileggi's book about Henry Hill, while Scorsese was filming The Color of Money in 1986. Scorsese's opening line was simple and direct. "I've been waiting for this book my entire life." Pileggi's response matched the energy perfectly. "I've been waiting for this phone call my entire life." But production didn't start immediately. Funding materialized for The Last Temptation of Christ, and Goodfellas got delayed. When they finally sat down to write, Scorsese and Pileggi developed what Scorsese called a building blocks approach. Instead of outlining a traditional 3-act structure, they selected individual passages from the book and assembled them into an episodic framework. The idea was to avoid conventional narrative rising action in favor of constant momentum. Scorsese wanted the film to begin like a gunshot and get faster from there. They went through 12 complete drafts, refining and restructuring until they had something that felt less like a movie and more like a runaway train. The result was a screenplay that deliberately avoided the structure every screenwriting book recommends. No clear act breaks, no traditional setup and payoff, just acceleration. Every rewatch, you're watching a film built backward from a book, assembled like a documentary instead of a drama. Number 15. Ray Liotta's mother was dying of cancer throughout the entire production of Goodfellas. He was carrying that grief every single day on set, trying to channel it into a character who's supposed to be charismatic, charming, and increasingly unhinged. The weight of that real-world pain surfaced most visibly in one specific scene: Henry Hill pistol whipping his neighbor Bruce across the street. Liotta later admitted in interviews that the rage you see on screen wasn't entirely manufactured for the camera. "You're dealing with real anger," he said. "My mom had cancer. There was a lot of anger about her being sick." Martin Scorsese knew what Liotta was going through. When Liotta received particularly bad news about his mother's condition, Scorsese visited his trailer and offered to let him leave production temporarily to be with her. Liotta refused. He insisted on staying and finishing the work. Meanwhile, the actor playing Bruce was reportedly so frightened by Liotta's intensity during filming that he stayed across the street between takes, keeping physical distance from the emotional storm Liotta was channeling. Every rewatch, that scene carries different weight. You're not just watching Henry Hill lose control. You're watching a son processing rage at a situation he can't control, redirecting grief into a character spiraling toward his own destruction. The performance isn't just method acting, it's survival. And Liotta wasn't the only actor bringing obsessive preparation to the role. Number 14. Robert De Niro's preparation for Jimmy Conway went far beyond reading the script. According to Henry Hill's own account in the UK documentary The Real Goodfella, De Niro called him 7 to 8 times every single day during pre-production. The questions weren't broad character sketches. They were granular, physical, obsessive. How did Jimmy Burke walk? How did he hold his cigarette? What did his laugh sound like? How did he handle a ketchup bottle at breakfast? Nicholas Pileggi recalled one particular moment that perfectly captured De Niro's approach. approach. De Niro wanted to know the exact way Jimmy Burke rolled a ketchup bottle in his palm while sitting at a diner table. Pileggi explained it in detail. Then, when Pileggi watched the finished film, there it was. De Niro performing that exact tiny gesture on screen. It just gave it authenticity to detail, Pileggi noted. But De Niro's commitment went beyond gestures. He refused to use prop money in the cash handling scenes because he didn't like the way fake bills felt in his hands. Prop master Robert Griffin had to supply $5,000 of his own real money for those sequences. After every take, Griffin would yell, "Everybody freeze," so the scattered bills could be collected, counted, and secured before anyone left the set. De Niro also had a specialty jewelry store close privately, so he could personally select every watch and pinky ring his character would wear. Every rewatch, those aren't acting choices. That's documentary-level precision captured on film. Number 13. Robert De Niro was not initially attached to Goodfellas. He wasn't circling the project. He wasn't negotiating terms. He wasn't part of the conversation at all. When Martin Scorsese was developing the film and trying to figure out who should play Jimmy Conway, he apparently mentioned the challenge to De Niro in passing. De Niro's response was immediate and direct. "Why don't I do it?" That was it. No lengthy negotiation, no demands for the lead role, just a simple offer to take the supporting part. The ease of his commitment shocked everyone involved. That decision changed everything. De Niro agreeing to play Jimmy Conway secured Warner Brothers financing for the entire production. The studio wouldn't greenlight a mob movie with an unproven lead and no major star attached. De Niro's participation gave them the commercial safety net they needed to take a risk on Ray Liotta. Without De Niro volunteering for the smaller role, the movie doesn't get made. It's that simple. His name on the project was the key that unlocked studio funding. De Niro also helped Liotta adjust to the intensity of a Scorsese production in his own way. He placed a fake severed horse head in Liotta's trailer as a Godfather prank, a darkly playful initiation. But he also maintained deliberate emotional distance from Liotta on set, presumably to preserve the uneasy dynamic between their characters. Every rewatch, De Niro's restraint is what makes Jimmy Conway so terrifying. He's calm until he isn't. Number 12. Paul Sorvino had no difficulty with the surface elements of Paulie Cicero. He was from Brooklyn. He understood the speech patterns, the mannerisms, the cultural texture of an Italian-American mob boss. That part felt natural, but Sorvino couldn't access what he described in a 1990 New York Times interview as that kernel of coldness and absolute hardness that is antithetical to my nature. He spent 2 full months preparing for the role, trying to find that emotional center, and he kept coming up empty. 3 days before filming was scheduled to begin, Sorvino called his manager with a desperate request. "Get me out of this. I can't do it." His agent told him to sleep on it, to give it one more night before making any final decisions. That night, Sorvino was walking through his house and happened to pass a mirror. He caught his own reflection and stopped. The expression staring back at him was something he didn't recognize. A look of menace. Cold, hard, dangerous. He'd found it without realizing he was looking. He channeled that accidental discovery directly into Paulie Cicero and showed up to set the next day ready to work. The irony? When Sorvino finally saw the completed film, he thought it was boring, excessively violent, and not very good. He genuinely believed he'd hurt his career by taking the role. Every rewatch, that cold stare that defines Paulie Cicero took 2 months of struggle and almost didn't happen at all. Number 11. Martin Scorsese originally offered Joe Pesci the role of Paulie Cicero, the older mob boss, eventually played by Paul Sorvino. Scorsese's reasoning was logical. Pesci was 47 years old at the time, and Scorsese believed he was too old to convincingly play the wild, violent young Tommy DeVito. Pesci disagreed strongly. He told Scorsese directly, "I don't want to play that part." Scorsese, frustrated, cursed at him and hung up the phone. Pesci called back, cursed at Scorsese in return, then called a third time to apologize. But he still didn't want to play Paulie. To prove he could handle Tommy, Pesci went to makeup artist Mike Westmore and had him apply facial lifts and fit him with a wig to make him look younger. Then, Pesci had a friend follow him around with a camera while he performed in character as Tommy DeVito. He flew to New York, walked into Scorsese's office, and showed him the tape. "What do you think?" Pesci asked. It worked. Scorsese gave him the role that would eventually win Pesci the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. Frank Vincent, who played Billy Batts, had originally wanted the Paulie role himself. Vincent and Pesci were former comedy partners. Their 1976 low-budget film, The Death Collector, had first caught Robert De Niro's attention. Every rewatch, Tommy DeVito only exists because Pesci fought for it. All right, we're at the halfway mark and things are about to get even wilder. Before we hit the top 10, what's your favorite Goodfellas quote or moment? Drop it in the comments. And if you're enjoying this, smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps the channel grow. Number 10. When Joe Pesci was a teenager working as a waiter at a restaurant frequented by wise guys, he made a mistake. He told a connected guy that he was funny. The mobster's reaction was immediate and terrifying. He went cold. He demanded to know exactly what Pesci meant by that. Was he a clown? Was he there to amuse him? The young Pesci, genuinely frightened, tried to backtrack and defuse the situation, but the moment stayed with him for decades. Years later, while preparing for Goodfellas, Pesci shared that story with Martin Scorsese. Scorsese immediately recognized it as the defining scene of the entire film. But here's the thing, the funny how exchange was never in the screenplay, not in any of the 12 drafts. Scorsese told only Pesci and Ray Liotta what was about to happen, then rolled cameras without warning the other actors sitting at the table. Michael Imperioli, Frank Vincent, and the rest of the crew had no idea what was coming. Their visible discomfort, the nervous laughter, the darting eyes, the uncertain smiles, all of it is completely genuine. They're watching Joe Pesci improvise a scene rooted in real trauma, and they don't know if he's serious or joking. The scene was improvised across 4 or 5 takes, transcribed by the script supervisor, and then locked into the revised screenplay. Every rewatch, you're watching real fear, actors who genuinely don't know what's happening. And that authenticity is why the scene still makes audiences hold their breath 30 years later. Number 9. Before principal photography began, Martin Scorsese put the entire cast through 2 full weeks of rehearsal. But these weren't traditional rehearsals where actors memorize lines and block scenes. Scorsese had them improvise around the scripted dialogue, playing with rhythms, interruptions, overlapping speech, all the chaotic texture of real conversation. Script supervisors transcribed everything. Then, Scorsese went through the transcripts, selected the best moments, and incorporated them into a finalized shooting script that was followed precisely during production. The final screenplay became a hybrid of written dialogue and captured improvisation. This hybrid method created something unique. The film feels spontaneous and alive, but it's actually meticulously planned. And here's the statistical proof of how much the improvisation changed things. The original screenplay contained the F word 70 times. The finished film contains it 300 times. Nearly all of those additions came directly from Joe Pesci's improvised dialogue during those 2 weeks of rehearsal. Pesci understood the rhythm of how these men actually talked, the overlapping curses, the casual obscenity, the way profanity functioned as punctuation in their world. The voiceover narration was also drawn almost verbatim from the real Henry Hill's speech patterns. Nicholas Pileggi talked to Hill constantly during the writing process. Ray Liotta listened to FBI audio cassette tapes of Hill talking while driving to and from set every day, absorbing the cadence. Every rewatch, what sounds like pure chaos was actually rehearsed chaos, refined and locked in before cameras rolled. The spontaneity was engineered. Number 8. The Copacabana tracking shot is one of the most celebrated single takes in cinema history. It's been analyzed in film schools, referenced in countless other movies, and copied by directors for decades. But it exists because of a bureaucratic rejection. Martin Scorsese wanted to film Henry and Karen entering the Copacabana through the front door, the glamorous main entrance where celebrities and mob figures would typically arrive. He couldn't get permission. The club refused to let the production shoot there. Rather than accept defeat or work around the problem with simple coverage, Scorsese transformed the limitation into the film's signature moment. He conceived a single, unbroken Steadicam shot that follows Henry and Karen through the back entrance, down into the kitchen, past the cooks and waiters and dishwashers, through the backstage chaos, and finally into the club itself, where a table materializes for them right up front. The shot became a visual metaphor. Henry is seducing Karen by showing her his power and access, and the criminal underworld is seducing Henry with that same intoxicating sense of being above normal rules. Steadicam operator Larry McConkey faced a specific technical challenge. The Arriflex BL camera's side-to-side magazine caused the rig to grow progressively heavier on one side as film ran through it. Scorsese played Then He Kissed Me by the Crystals over speakers on set, so McConkey could time his movements to the music. The shot required only 8 takes during a single half-day session. Every rewatch, the most iconic shot in Goodfellas exists because of a bureaucratic number 7. Goodfellas has no original orchestral score. Not a single note of original composition. Every piece of music in the film is a pre-existing licensed song, and Martin Scorsese knew exactly which songs he wanted 2 full years before he shot a single frame of film. Music editor Christopher Brooks confirmed this in interviews. He knew every one of those songs 2 years before he shot a frame of film. Approximately 43 licensed songs made it into the final cut, making it one of the most expensive soundtracks in Hollywood history at that time. The music follows a deliberate narrative arc. Innocent 1950s doo-wop like The Moon Glows and The Crystals underscore Henry's rise, the early days when everything feels exciting and glamorous. As the story progresses into the 1970s, the soundtrack shifts to heavier rock. Rolling Stones, Cream, Harry Nilsson. The music gets darker as Henry's life gets darker. Then, after Henry's arrest, something radical happens. There is no music at all until the end credits, just silence. That absence is devastating. The film closes with Sid Vicious covering My Way, an imitation of Frank Sinatra's Glamour performed by a dead punk. It's the perfect coda. For the Layla montage, Scorsese played the piano coda of Derek and the Dominoes' Layla on set during filming, so that each individual shot could be designed to correspond with specific musical phrases. Editor Thelma Schoonmaker had to work meticulously to ensure everything landed exactly where Scorsese planned. Every rewatch, that silence after the arrest hits harder than any orchestral score ever could. Number 6. The climactic helicopter/May 11th sequence is one of the most viscerally exhausting sequences in American cinema. It cycles through 6 classic rock songs in rapid succession. Harry Nilsson, Mick Jagger, The Who, Rolling Stones, Muddy Waters, and George Harrison. The editing accelerates until you feel like you're trapped inside Henry Hill's cocaine-fueled paranoia. That feeling wasn't an accident. It was engineered through obsessive refinement. Editor Thelma Schoonmaker deliberately made the sequence faster with each screening. She recalled the process in interviews. "We were jump-cutting Ray Liotta making meatballs and looking for the helicopter, and every time we screened it, we said, we can make it faster, faster, faster." They kept trimming frames, tightening cuts, removing breath until the sequence felt like it was running on pure adrenaline and dread. The goal was to make the audience feel Henry's paranoia, not just watch it. David Chase, creator of The Sopranos, called the result unprecedented. The way music and film are used there so that you actually feel you're high on coke? I don't think anybody's ever done that before or since. Ray Liotta had to perform each action with a specific rhythm that could later be chopped and accelerated in the editing room. Every rewatch, that paranoid speed wasn't created through clever cutting alone. It was fine-tuned through dozens of screenings, each one faster than the last. Number 5. Martin Scorsese wanted absolute authenticity in the background of his mob movie, so he did something most directors wouldn't dare. He hired actual mob-connected individuals as extras. Nicholas Pileggi recalled the process with a mix of amusement and disbelief. "We'd put the word out. Anybody who wants to be in the movie, come." And they came. When Warner Brothers required social security numbers for payroll as legally mandated for all employees, the wise guys simply gave fake ones. Pileggi noted, "Nobody ever figured out where that money went or who cashed the checks." One particularly notable piece of casting, Louis Ippolito, a corrupt NYPD detective who was later convicted of actual mafia-related murders, played the character Fat Andy in the film. Federal prosecutor Edward McDonald, who handled the real Henry Hill case, played himself in the witness protection scene, reenacting his actual conversation with the Hills almost word for word. Scorsese also maintained obsessive control over tiny details. He personally tied Ray Liotta's tie every single morning to ensure it looked exactly right. His parents, Charles and Catherine Scorsese, ironed all the oversized 1970s shirt collars on set to get the period details perfect. Every rewatch, some of those background faces belong to actual criminals. The authenticity you feel isn't just good acting, it's the real thing standing right there in frame. And the strangest casting story involves the lead role itself. Number 4. Warner Brothers wanted a marquee star to play Henry Hill. Tom Cruise received first right of refusal for the role. Producer Irwin Winkler confirmed this to GQ in 2010, stating plainly, Tom Cruise was discussed. Sean Penn, Alec Baldwin, Val Kilmer, and Nicolas Cage were all on the studio's wish list. Ray Liotta was not. Liotta later joked bitterly, "I think they would have rather had Eddie Murphy than me." But Liotta had been campaigning for the role since reading Wise Guy in 1986. He sent Scorsese a thank you letter after their first meeting, along with a VHS copy of Dominic and Eugene to showcase his range. The pivotal moment came at the 1988 Venice Film Festival, where Scorsese was premiering The Last Temptation of Christ amid literal death threats and heavy security. Liotta spotted Scorsese in the Excelsior Hotel lobby and, excited, rushed toward him shouting, "Hey, Marty!" Bodyguards immediately grabbed Liotta and shoved him back hard. In a 2023 Variety tribute, Scorsese recalled the moment with perfect clarity. He handled it perfectly, very quietly, very calmly. He diffused the situation. "That was when I knew he would be Henry Hill. Scorsese had seen Liotta's menacing performance in Something Wild and worried he might be too aggressive, too intense for the everyman quality Henry needed. The bodyguard incident proved Liotta had range, control, and the ability to shift gears instantly. Every rewatch, Henry Hill almost had Tom Cruise's face. The entire film would have been unrecognizable. Number 3. While Ray Liotta was waiting to hear if he'd landed the role of Henry Hill, another offer came in. Tim Burton, fresh off the success of Beetlejuice, was preparing to direct Batman, and he was interested in casting Liotta as Harvey Dent, the district attorney who would eventually become Two-Face in future sequels. Liotta's reported response to his agent was blunt and profane. "Are you effing nuts, Batman?" He turned it down flat. Years later, Liotta admitted he regretted that decision, acknowledging that the Batman franchise would have been a financially smart move for his career. But in the moment, Liotta made a bet. He turned down a guaranteed superhero franchise role to stay available for a mob movie directed by Martin Scorsese with no guarantee he'd even get the part. The gamble paid off. Scorsese eventually cast him. The role of Harvey Dent in Batman 1989 went to Billy D. Williams instead, who played the character as a smooth politician with no hint of the villain he'd later become. Williams never got to play Two-Face. That transformation happened years later with Tommy Lee Jones in Batman Forever. Every rewatch, you're watching an actor who turned down financial security and franchise fame to chase an iconic role in a film the studio thought would bomb. Liotta bet everything on Scorsese and a character nobody else wanted. He won. Number 2. Goodfellas received 6 Academy Award nominations in 1991. It won exactly one. Joe Pesci for Best Supporting Actor. When Pesci walked onto the stage at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion to accept the award, he delivered what remains the shortest acceptance speech in Oscar history. The entire speech, word for word, "It's my privilege. Thank you." 6 words. Then he walked off. The Best Picture loss to Kevin Costner's Dances with Wolves remains one of the most debated and controversial Oscar decisions in the Academy's history. Time magazine noted the Academy's predictable tendency to indulge its fondness for weighty historical epics over challenging contemporary films. The BAFTA Awards, the British equivalent of the Oscars, offered some vindication. Goodfellas won 5 BAFTAs, including Best Film and Best Director. But Martin Scorsese would have to wait 17 more years before finally winning the Academy Award for Best Director with The Departed in 2007. The film's final image, Tommy DeVito firing a revolver directly into the camera, is Scorsese's deliberate homage to the Great Train Robbery from 1903. Scorsese explained the choice to critic Mark Cousins. Basically, the plot of this picture is very similar to the Great Train Robbery. It hasn't changed. 90 years later, it's the same story. Every rewatch, the performance that won with 6 words changed the way mob movies were made forever. Number 1. The real Henry Hill was paid $480,000 2 weeks before Goodfellas began filming. That money was his payment for the rights to his life story, his cooperation with Nicholas Pileggi during the writing of Wise Guy, and his consultation during the film's development. When Hill finally saw the finished movie, he called it 95 to 99% accurate. He was thrilled. He loved it. He couldn't stop talking about it. That became the problem. Henry Hill, the man who had survived decades in the mob, who had testified against Jimmy Burke and Paul Vario, who had successfully disappeared into the FBI's witness protection program and started a new anonymous life, couldn't resist bragging about the movie. He talked about it publicly. He gave interviews using his real name. He revealed details about his life in witness protection. He blew his own cover. The FBI expelled him from the program. The one thing protecting him from potential retaliation was gone because he was too proud of the film to stay quiet. The irony gets even darker. Years after the film's release, Hill confessed a surprising preference in an interview. "I don't watch Goodfellas. I prefer The Godfather." The man who lived the story, who inspired one of the greatest crime films ever made, who destroyed his protection talking about it, admitted he'd rather watch Coppola's romanticized fantasy. Every rewatch, the movie you're watching immortalized Henry Hill and destroyed the second life he'd built. Goodfellas survived a lead actor nobody wanted, a supporting star who refused his assigned role, test audiences who walked out demanding refunds, and a studio that slashed its release in half. The MPAA demanded blood be removed frame by frame. The most iconic scene was never in the script. It came from Joe Pesci's teenage trauma. What emerged was creative stubbornness, Scorsese fighting for an unknown lead, Pesci reinventing his character through personal pain. Thelma Schoonmaker cutting faster until the paranoia felt real. Nearly every element that makes Goodfellas iconic arrived through constraint transformed into invention. If this video surprised you, drop your favorite fact in the comments, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves this movie as much as you do. And as always, funny how? We'll see you next time.